Sarah Martinez never imagined that bringing her 7-year-old daughter Emma to the estate auction would change everything. But the whispers started the moment they walked through the doors of Henderson's auction house that Saturday morning. Sarah had been attending auctions for 3 years, ever since her husband David lost his job, and she started reselling antiques to keep their family afloat. And she always left Emma with her mother on auction days. But today her mother was sick, and Sarah couldn't afford to miss this sale. The other dealers noticed immediately. Margaret Chen, who ran the biggest antique shop in town, leaned over to her assistant and said loud enough for others to hear that it was unprofessional to bring children to serious auctions. Robert Blackwood, a dealer known for his aggressive bidding, rolled his eyes and muttered something about amateurs. Sarah felt her face burn with embarrassment, but she held Emma's hand tighter and found 2 seats near the back. Emma sat quietly, her dark eyes watching everything with an intensity that Sarah had noticed more and more lately. The girl had always been observant, but in recent months she seemed to study people in a way that made Sarah slightly uncomfortable, as if Emma could see something others couldn't. The auctioneer, a thin man named Gerald with a voice that carried authority, stepped up to the podium and welcomed everyone. The first item was a Victorian mirror with a starting bid of $200. Sarah had her eye on it, thinking she could flip it for $400 if the frame was solid. She raised her paddle, but before Gerald could acknowledge her bid, Emma tugged on her sleeve. When Sarah looked down, Emma whispered that the man in the blue jacket was going to bid $320. Sarah frowned, wondering how Emma could possibly know that. But sure enough, when Gerald called for higher bids, the man in the blue jacket raised his paddle and said $320. Sarah felt a strange chill run down her spine. It had to be a coincidence. The auction continued, and Sarah tried to focus on the items she wanted, but Emma kept whispering numbers to her. A set of crystal decanters would go for $190. A mahogany desk would sell at $850. A collection of vintage postcards would end at $75. Each time, Emma was exactly right. Not close, not approximately, but precisely correct down to the dollar. Sarah's hands started shaking. She looked at her daughter, this small girl with braided hair and a pink sweater, and felt something between wonder and fear. After the 10th item, when Emma whispered that the oil painting would go for $1,200, Sarah couldn't take it anymore. She leaned down and asked Emma how she knew. Emma looked up at her with those dark, knowing eyes and said she could just tell, that she saw the numbers floating above people's heads right before they bid, like little glowing signs that told her exactly what they were going to say. Sarah felt her breath catch. This wasn't normal. This wasn't possible, but it was happening. During the break, Sarah took Emma outside into the parking lot, her mind racing with questions and concerns. She asked Emma when this started, and Emma said it began a few weeks ago, that at first she thought everyone could see the numbers, but then she realized it was just her. Sarah didn't know what to do with this information. She thought about taking Emma home, about forgetting the whole thing and pretending this wasn't happening, but they needed money desperately. Their rent was overdue, the utilities were about to be shut off, and this auction was supposed to be their chance to stock up on inventory. She looked at Emma and asked if seeing the numbers hurt or scared her. Emma shook her head and said it was actually kind of fun, like a game where she always knew the answer. Sarah made a decision then that she would question for months afterward. She asked Emma if she wanted to help Mommy with the auction, if she could keep whispering the numbers so Sarah would know when to stop bidding. Emma nodded eagerly, happy to be useful, not understanding the weight of what her mother was asking. They went back inside, and Sarah approached the auction with a strategy she had never had before. When a Georgian silver tea set came up, something she knew she could sell for a good profit, she waited for Emma's whisper. $240, Emma said. Sarah bid $250 and won it, beating out Margaret Chen, who had stopped at $240, exactly as Emma predicted. Margaret's face darkened with frustration, and she glanced back at Sarah with suspicion. Over the next hour, Sarah won 6 items, each time bidding just above the number Emma whispered to her. She acquired a collection of first edition books, a set of porcelain figurines, an Art Deco lamp, a Persian rug, and 2 oil paintings, all for prices that left her with huge profit margins. The other dealers began to notice. Robert Blackwood stood up and asked Gerald if something was wrong with the bidding process, his voice tight with anger. He said someone seemed to have insider information, that the patterns were too convenient to be luck. Gerald assured him everything was legitimate, but his eyes lingered on Sarah and Emma. Margaret Chen approached Sarah during another break, her expression cold and calculating. She asked Sarah how long she had been coming to these auctions, and Sarah said 3 years. Margaret nodded slowly and said that in all that time Sarah had been a mediocre dealer at best, barely breaking even on most purchases, so it was very interesting that today, with her daughter present, she suddenly became a genius at bidding. Sarah felt her stomach twist with anxiety. She told Margaret it was just a good day, that she had done her research. Margaret leaned closer and said that she didn't believe in coincidences and that she would be watching very carefully. The accusation hung in the air like a threat. Sarah's initial excitement about their success started to curdle into guilt and fear. She looked at Emma, who was swinging her legs happily in her chair, oblivious to the tension building around them. Sarah realized she was using her daughter's impossible gift to cheat, even if she didn't fully understand how the gift worked. She told Emma they should leave, that they had enough items for today, but Emma begged to stay. She said she was having fun, that she liked helping, that she wanted to see what other numbers she could predict. Sarah felt trapped between her daughter's innocent enthusiasm and the growing hostility from the other dealers. She decided they would stay for just a few more items, just enough to make the day worthwhile, and then they would leave and never speak of this again. But things got worse. The next item was a rare 19th century pocket watch, the kind of piece that serious collectors fought over. Sarah knew it could sell for thousands, and she had never been able to compete in that range before. Emma whispered 3,800, and Sarah felt her heart race. If she could win this for 3,900, she could sell it for 6,000 or 7,000. The temptation was overwhelming. She raised her paddle and entered the bidding. Robert Blackwood was bidding against her, his face red with determination. The price climbed past 3,000, and Sarah kept raising her paddle, trusting Emma's number. At 3,700, Robert bid again, and Sarah countered with 3,800. Robert paused, his paddle halfway up, and then he lowered it with a look of disgust. Sarah had won. Gerald brought his gavel down, and the watch was hers. But instead of triumph, Sarah felt a wave of shame. She had just spent money she didn't have on a watch she won through her daughter's unexplainable ability. Robert Blackwood stood up and pointed at Sarah, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. He said this was fraud, that no one's bidding luck changes this dramatically, that Sarah must have someone feeding her information about the other bidders' limits. Gerald tried to calm him down, but other dealers started murmuring in agreement. Margaret Chen stood up and said she supported a full investigation, that the integrity of the auction house was at stake. Sarah felt panic rising in her chest. She grabbed Emma's hand and stood up, saying they were leaving, that she didn't need to listen to these accusations. But as she turned to go, Emma spoke up in her clear, childlike voice. She said the numbers weren't luck, that she could see them, that she knew exactly what everyone was going to bid before they did it. The room went completely silent. Everyone stared at the small girl holding her mother's hand. Robert laughed, a harsh sound, and said that was the most ridiculous thing he had ever heard, that a child claiming to be psychic was somehow worse than just admitting to corporate espionage. Margaret said this was absurd, that Sarah was clearly coaching her daughter to provide cover for whatever scheme she was running. Sarah tried to pull Emma toward the door, but Emma wouldn't move. She looked around at all the angry faces and said she could prove it. She said the next item, a bronze sculpture, would sell for $670, and the woman in the red scarf would be the winner. Gerald, looking both skeptical and curious, decided to let it play out. He brought up the bronze sculpture and started the bidding. The tension in the room was thick as people bid, some out of genuine interest, others just to see if Emma was right. The price climbed to 500, then 550, then 600. A woman in a red scarf, someone Sarah didn't recognize, raised her paddle at 620. Another bidder went to 650, but the woman countered with 670. There was a pause, and then the other bidder shook his head. Gerald looked at the woman in the red scarf and said, "Going once, going twice," and then his gavel came down. $670 to the woman in the red scarf, exactly as Emma had predicted. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Robert said it was a setup, that Sarah must have planted the woman. Margaret demanded to know how Emma did it. Gerald, his professional composure cracking, asked Emma directly how she knew. Emma, with the simple honesty of a child, said she saw glowing numbers appear above people's heads right before they were going to bid, and the last number that glowed was always the winning bid. Some people laughed nervously, others looked disturbed, and a few dealers stood up and left, muttering about wasting their time on circus acts. But Gerald, who had been running auctions for 30 years and had seen just about everything, looked at Emma with genuine fascination. He asked if she could do it again. Emma nodded and said the next item, a set of silver candlesticks, would go for $230. Gerald put the candlesticks up, and the bidding began. People bid more aggressively this time, as if trying to disprove Emma's prediction. But when the gavel fell, the price was $230 exactly. Then Emma predicted the next item would go for $905, an odd number that seemed too specific to guess. And again, she was right. And the next item at $412. Right again. After 5 consecutive correct predictions, down to the exact dollar, even the skeptics couldn't deny something extraordinary was happening. The mood in the room shifted from hostility to a mixture of awe and unease. Margaret Chen sat down slowly, her expression troubled, and said she had never seen anything like this in 40 years of dealing. Robert Blackwood, his anger replaced by confusion, asked Sarah what kind of child she had. Sarah, overwhelmed and frightened by the attention, said she didn't know, that this had only started recently, that she didn't understand it any better than they did. Gerald, ever the businessman, saw an opportunity. He approached Sarah and asked if Emma would be willing to demonstrate her ability at his other auctions, that people would pay good money to witness something like this, that it could be profitable for everyone involved. Sarah immediately said no, that her daughter wasn't a sideshow, that they were leaving and wouldn't be coming back. She pulled Emma toward the exit, but Emma resisted. She said she liked using her ability, that it made her feel special instead of weird, that she wanted to help people understand what she could do. Sarah knelt down and looked into her daughter's eyes, seeing both the child she had always known and something else, something unusual and powerful that she didn't fully comprehend. She told Emma that people were afraid of things they didn't understand, that this gift or ability or whatever it was might make life harder for her, not easier. Emma said she didn't care if people were afraid, that she was tired of hiding what she could do, that she wanted to be honest about it. The wisdom in those words, coming from a 7-year-old, made Sarah's eyes fill with tears. She realized her daughter was braver than she was, more willing to face the truth of who she was despite the consequences. Sarah stood up and told Gerald they would think about his offer, but they needed time. She also said that she would be returning all the items she won today, that it didn't feel right to keep them knowing how she had won them. Gerald protested, saying the auctions were fair, that Emma hadn't broken any rules, but Sarah insisted. She said she needed to do this for her own peace of mind, that she couldn't build their future on something that felt like cheating, even if technically it wasn't. Margaret Chen, who had been listening, surprised everyone by saying she respected that decision, that it took integrity to walk away from easy money. She approached Sarah and said that if Emma's ability was real, and it certainly seemed to be, then maybe there were legitimate uses for it that didn't involve auctions. She mentioned that authentication experts, insurance companies, and collectors often struggled to determine the true value of items, that someone who could predict market behavior with accuracy could be invaluable in those fields. The suggestion planted a seed in Sarah's mind. Over the following weeks, she started researching, making phone calls, reaching out to people in the art and antique world. She discovered that Emma's ability, while impossible to explain scientifically, had practical applications that went beyond just winning auctions. Museums wanted to consult with Emma about potential acquisitions, wondering if her predictions could help them avoid overpriced purchases. Private collectors asked if Emma could assess whether items at upcoming sales were likely to appreciate in value. Insurance companies inquired about using her abilities to verify claims and valuations. Sarah set up strict boundaries, insisting that Emma only work a few hours a week, that her schooling and childhood came first, that she could stop anytime she wanted. Emma approached it all with the same innocent enthusiasm, happy to be useful, excited to learn about art and history and the stories behind the objects she evaluated. The money started coming in, enough to catch up on rent, to pay bills, to start saving for the future. But more importantly, Emma's confidence grew. The kids at school who had teased her for being quiet and strange started to see her differently when news spread about her unusual talent. She was invited to speak at her school's career day, and she talked about her ability with pride instead of shame. Sarah watched her daughter transform from a shy, uncertain child into someone who embraced what made her different. The mocking from that first auction became a distant memory, replaced by respect and curiosity from people who encountered Emma's gift. Robert Blackwood eventually apologized, admitting he had reacted out of frustration at being outbid, and he became one of Emma's advocates, referring clients to her consulting services. Margaret Chen became a mentor of sorts, teaching Emma about the antique business and helping Sarah navigate the complex world of authentication and appraisal. Gerald started introducing Emma as his good luck charm, though he never again asked her to predict bids at his auctions, respecting the boundaries Sarah had set. One evening, about 6 months after that first auction, Sarah sat with Emma on their apartment balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. She asked Emma if she ever wished she didn't have her ability, if she wanted to be like other kids. Emma thought about it for a moment and then said no, that her ability was part of who she was, that it helped people and made her family's life better, and that feeling different wasn't the same as feeling wrong. Sarah hugged her daughter close, marveling at the wisdom and strength in someone so young. She thought about all the times she had worried about Emma, all the moments she had wished her daughter could just be normal, and she realized that normal was overrated. Emma's gift, strange and unexplainable as it was, had taught both of them valuable lessons about authenticity, courage, and the importance of embracing what makes each person unique. The auction house incident became a turning point, not just financially, but emotionally and spiritually. It forced Sarah to confront her own fears about being different, about standing out, about letting her daughter shine in ways that made others uncomfortable. It taught Emma that her value wasn't determined by how well she fit in, but by how honestly she lived and how generously she used her gifts to help others. As the months turned into years, Emma's ability remained consistent and strong. She never lost the power to see those glowing numbers, and she never stopped marveling at them, approaching each prediction with the same childlike wonder she had shown that first day at Henderson's auction house. Sarah built a successful consulting business around Emma's talent, carefully managing her daughter's time and energy to ensure she had a balanced childhood filled with friends, school, hobbies, and normal 7-year-old activities, alongside the unusual work she did. They developed a reputation for integrity and accuracy, turning down offers that felt exploitative or that would have required Emma to work too much. Sarah made sure every client understood that Emma was a child first and a consultant second, and that her well-being was non-negotiable. Most people respected that, and the ones who didn't were politely but firmly declined. Emma's teachers noticed changes too, reporting that she participated more in class, that she seemed happier and more confident, that she had stopped trying to hide her intelligence and unique perspective. Her grades improved not because she was smarter, but because she was no longer afraid to show how smart she was. She made friends with other kids who appreciated her quirks rather than mocked them, building a social circle based on genuine connection rather than pretense. David, Sarah's husband, who had been struggling with depression since losing his job, found new purpose in managing the business side of Emma's consulting work. He handled scheduling, contracts, and client communications, relieved to finally contribute financially to the family again. The dynamic between him and Sarah improved as the financial pressure eased, and their marriage grew stronger as they worked together to support their extraordinary daughter. There were still challenges, of course. Moments when Emma felt overwhelmed by the attention. Days when she just wanted to be a normal kid without any special abilities. Times when Sarah questioned whether they were doing the right thing. But they talked through it all, maintaining open communication and adjusting their approach as needed. Emma learned to advocate for herself, to say when she needed a break, to set her own boundaries within the larger framework Sarah had established. The community's perception shifted dramatically over time, from the initial mockery and suspicion at the auction house to genuine respect and appreciation. Local news covered Emma's story, framing it as an inspiring tale of a young girl who turned something that made her different into something that helped others. National media reached out, but Sarah declined those opportunities, wanting to protect Emma's privacy and prevent her from becoming a spectacle. They kept their lives as normal as possible, living in the same apartment, shopping at the same stores, attending the same school, just with the added dimension of Emma's unique consulting work. On Emma's 8th birthday, Sarah threw her a party and invited all her school friends plus some of the adults who had become part of their extended support system, including Margaret, Gerald, and even Robert. As Emma blew out the candles on her cake, surrounded by people who loved and accepted her exactly as she was, Sarah reflected on how far they had come from that difficult day at the auction house. The mocking and whispers that had stung so badly a year ago now seemed like necessary pain, the kind of discomfort that precedes growth and transformation. Emma made a wish, and though she didn't say it out loud, Sarah suspected it had something to do with helping more people, with using her gift in bigger ways, with continuing to grow into whoever she was meant to become. Later that night, after the guests had left and Emma was getting ready for bed, she asked Sarah if she thought her ability would last forever, or if it might go away someday. Sarah admitted she didn't know, that nothing about this situation came with guarantees or explanations, but that whether the ability stayed or went, Emma would always be remarkable, always be loved, always be enough exactly as she was. Emma smiled and said she hoped it stayed because she had gotten used to the glowing numbers, that they felt like friends now, like a special language only she could read. Sarah kissed her daughter goodnight and stood in the doorway watching Emma drift off to sleep. This small person who had taught her so much about courage and authenticity and the power of embracing what makes you different. The auction house where it all began continued to thrive, and Gerald often told the story of the girl who could predict every bid, though he was careful to respect Emma's privacy and never used her real name.
He said it reminded him and his clients that the world was full of mysteries, that not everything could be explained or understood, and that sometimes you just had to accept the impossible and adjust your expectations accordingly. Margaret incorporated lessons from Emma's story into her own business philosophy, becoming more open to unconventional methods and unusual perspectives.
She often said that meeting Emma had challenged her assumptions about what was possible, and that it had made her a better dealer and a more open-minded person. Robert framed his apology to Sarah and Emma in his office, a reminder to himself not to let ego and frustration cloud his judgment, to approach the unusual with curiosity rather than hostility. As Emma grew older, approaching her teenage years, her ability evolved slightly, becoming more nuanced, showing her not just the final bid but sometimes the entire bidding sequence, giving her deeper insights into market psychology and buyer behavior. She started writing down her observations, creating a kind of informal research study on human decision-making in high-pressure situations. Sarah encouraged this intellectual curiosity, proud that her daughter was trying to understand her gift rather than just use it. They talked about the ethics of prediction, about free will and determinism, about whether knowing the future changed the future, heady conversations that seemed almost absurd to be having with a preteen, but that Emma engaged with thoughtfully and seriously. Emma's presence in the auction and antique world became something of an open secret, a phenomenon that people whispered about with wonder rather than skepticism, a reminder that sometimes reality was stranger and more magical than anyone wanted to admit. The girl who had been mocked for being different became celebrated for being exceptional, and through it all, Sarah made sure Emma remembered that her worth had never changed, that the mocking was about others' limitations, not hers, and that the celebration now was nice but not necessary for her to be valuable and loved. They had learned together that the most important predictions weren't about auction bids or market values, but about seeing the potential in people, about believing in possibilities, about trusting that what seems impossible might just be undiscovered, and about having the courage to let your light shine even when others want to dim it, because that light, that unique gift, that special quality that makes you different, is exactly what the world needs, even if the world doesn't know it yet. The journey from that first mocking day at Henderson's auction house to where they stood now had been filled with unexpected turns and valuable lessons that neither Sarah nor Emma could have anticipated. Sarah often reflected on the moment she made the choice to use Emma's ability that first day, the guilt she had felt, the moral conflict that had torn at her conscience. She had apologized to Emma many times for putting her in that position, for asking a 7-year-old to help her cheat the system, but Emma always responded with the same gentle wisdom that seemed far beyond her years, saying that every mistake teaches us something important, and that without that day, they never would have discovered how her gift could be used to help people legitimately. The relationships they built in the antique and auction community became like an extended family, people who understood the unique challenges of Emma's situation and supported them through the difficult moments. When Emma had a particularly rough week at school, dealing with kids who called her a freak or made jokes about fortune tellers, Margaret would take her to lunch and share stories about being one of the only Chinese women in the antique business 40 years ago, about the prejudice she faced, about how she turned being underestimated into an advantage. When David struggled with feelings of inadequacy, comparing himself to his daughter and feeling like his contributions were less valuable, Robert would remind him that managing Emma's business, protecting her interests, and ensuring she had a normal childhood was just as important as the predictions themselves. Gerald became a kind of grandfather figure to Emma, teaching her about the history of auctions, about different artistic periods and styles, about how to read people and understand what drives collectors and buyers. He would tell her that her ability to see the numbers was extraordinary, but her real gift was her empathy, her curiosity about people, her genuine interest in the stories behind the objects they valued. These relationships filled gaps in Emma's life, giving her adult role models who celebrated her uniqueness while also treating her like a regular kid who needed guidance, boundaries, and unconditional support. The financial stability that came from Emma's consulting work transformed their family in ways that went beyond just paying bills. Sarah was able to take classes in art history and appraisal, legitimizing her knowledge and building credentials that complemented Emma's abilities. David started therapy to address his depression and enrolled in business management courses to better handle the growing consulting practice. They moved to a larger apartment with a dedicated office space, creating clear separation between Emma's work life and her personal life. They took their first real vacation in years, a trip to New York City where they visited the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and Emma was mesmerized by the paintings and sculptures, asking questions that showed her developing appreciation for art beyond its monetary value. Sarah made sure they donated a portion of their income to children's charities and educational programs, wanting Emma to understand that gifts and talents came with responsibility to help others, not just to profit personally. Emma's school experience improved dramatically as she became more confident and open about who she was, but Sarah and David were careful to protect her from exploitation, turning down requests from classmates' parents who wanted Emma to predict lottery numbers or give them stock tips, explaining that her ability didn't work that way, that it was specific to auctions and valuation, not general fortune-telling. They dealt with skeptics too, people who insisted Emma's predictions were elaborate tricks, or that Sarah was running a con, and they learned to respond with patience rather than defensiveness, offering to demonstrate Emma's abilities under controlled conditions for those genuinely interested in understanding, while ignoring the trolls and cynics who would never be convinced no matter what evidence was presented. The media attention, which they had largely avoided, occasionally flared up when someone would write an article about the mysterious girl who could predict auction results, and Sarah would have to navigate the delicate balance between protecting Emma's privacy and not appearing to have something to hide. She gave a few carefully selected interviews to reputable journalists, always with Emma present and able to speak for herself, always emphasizing that Emma was a normal kid with an unusual ability, not a circus act or a commodity. These interviews helped shape the public narrative, presenting Emma as intelligent, grounded, and well-adjusted, rather than as some kind of mystical oddity. The scientific community showed interest too, with researchers from universities contacting Sarah about studying Emma's abilities, about running tests and experiments to understand how her predictions worked. Sarah was protective but open-minded, allowing a few non-invasive studies that treated Emma with respect and dignity, that didn't make her feel like a lab specimen. The results were inconclusive and puzzling, showing that Emma's brain activity during predictions was unusual, but not in ways that current neuroscience could explain, leading some researchers to theorize about quantum consciousness or precognition, while others simply admitted they had no framework for understanding what they observed. Emma found the studies interesting but not particularly important to her daily life, approaching them with the same curious detachment she brought to most things that tried to categorize or explain her. As Emma approached her 10th birthday, her ability had become so refined that she could often predict not just the final bid, but the entire psychological motivation behind it, understanding whether someone was bidding from genuine love of an object, from investment purposes, from competitive ego, or from sentimental attachment. This deeper insight made her consulting work even more valuable, as she could advise clients not just on what something would sell for, but on whether it was wise to pursue it given their actual motivations and resources. Museums particularly appreciated this nuanced guidance, as it helped them avoid getting into bidding wars over items that didn't truly align with their collections or missions. Private collectors valued her honesty when she told them they were pursuing an item for the wrong reasons, saving them from expensive mistakes driven by emotion rather than genuine passion. Insurance companies found her assessments invaluable for detecting fraud, as she could often tell when someone was misrepresenting their intentions or the value of claimed items. Sarah sometimes worried that Emma was growing up too fast, that the weight of her responsibilities and her unusual maturity were robbing her of childhood innocence. But Emma seemed to navigate both worlds with remarkable ease, spending her mornings at school learning long division and reading Harry Potter, then her afternoons consulting on six-figure art purchases before coming home to play video games with her friends. The duality of her life was unusual but not unhealthy, and Sarah learned to trust Emma's own assessment of her happiness and well-being, checking in regularly but not smothering her with concern. David, who had initially struggled with his daughter's abilities more than Sarah had, eventually became Emma's biggest champion, fierce in protecting her boundaries and tireless in managing the business aspects of her work. He developed a screening process for potential clients, vetting them carefully to ensure they would treat Emma with respect, that their requests were legitimate and ethical, that the compensation was fair but not exploitative. He negotiated contracts that protected Emma's interests, that limited her working hours, that included provisions for her education and normal childhood activities, that ensured she could walk away from any situation that made her uncomfortable. His transformation from a depressed, unemployed man who felt like a failure to a confident business manager and protective father was one of the unexpected blessings that came from Emma's gift, a reminder that sometimes what seems like a child's unusual ability can actually heal an entire family's wounds and restore everyone's sense of purpose and value. The auction house community, which had initially been so hostile and suspicious, became one of their strongest sources of support and advocacy. Dealers who had mocked Sarah that first day now referred clients to her, spoke highly of Emma's integrity and accuracy, and defended her against skeptics and critics. The transformation wasn't instant or universal. There were still dealers who resented Emma or refused to believe in her abilities, but the majority came to see her as a valuable resource who elevated the entire industry by bringing unprecedented accuracy to valuation and market prediction. Gerald's auction house thrived, in part because of the reputation it gained as the place where Emma's abilities had first been revealed, drawing curious collectors and dealers who wanted to be part of that history. He remained respectful of Emma's boundaries, never pressuring Sarah to bring her back for predictions, but he always made time when Emma wanted to attend an auction just for fun, setting aside a special seat for her and treating her like the honored guest she had become in his eyes. Margaret Chen, whose initial hostility had dissolved into genuine affection and mentorship, became one of Emma's most important teachers, not just about antiques and art, but about navigating life as someone who didn't fit the expected mold. She shared hard-won wisdom about dealing with prejudice, about turning obstacles into opportunities, about maintaining integrity when others tried to compromise it, about building a reputation based on excellence rather than conformity. Their lunches together became a regular tradition, a space where Emma could ask questions about business, about life, about how to handle the challenges of being different in a world that values sameness. Margaret never talked down to Emma, never treated her like a child who needed simplified explanations, and that respect meant everything to a girl who spent so much of her life being either dismissed as too young or exploited as too valuable. The friendship between them transcended age and background, built on mutual respect and shared experiences of being underestimated and having to prove themselves repeatedly. Robert's transformation was perhaps the most dramatic, from the angry dealer who had accused Sarah of fraud to one of Emma's most vocal supporters and advocates. He often told the story of that day at the auction house, not with pride, but with humility, using it as an example of how quickly we jump to conclusions about things we don't understand, how fear and frustration can make us cruel and unjust, how important it is to remain open to possibilities that challenge our assumptions about reality. He became particularly protective of Emma when dealing with skeptics, having been one himself, and understanding their mindset, able to address their concerns with credibility and patience. His referrals were some of the most valuable business Emma received, as he only sent clients he had thoroughly vetted and trusted, people who would appreciate Emma's abilities without trying to exploit them. The apology letter he had framed in his office became something he showed to new dealers and young people entering the business, a teaching tool about humility and growth and the importance of admitting when you're wrong. Emma herself, approaching her preteen years, was developing a sophisticated understanding of her own abilities and their implications. She kept detailed journals, not just recording her predictions, but reflecting on the experience of having a gift that set her apart, that made her simultaneously special and isolated, celebrated and scrutinized. She wrote about the loneliness that sometimes came with being different, even when that difference was valued and respected, about the pressure of always being accurate, about the fear that her abilities might someday disappear, and wondering who she would be without them. She wrote about the joy of helping people, of seeing their gratitude when her guidance led to good decisions, of feeling useful and valued in ways that went beyond typical childhood contributions. She wrote about her parents, about Sarah's journey from embarrassment to pride, about David's transformation from depression to purpose, about how their family had been broken and then rebuilt stronger around the unusual foundation of her gift. These journals, which Sarah read with Emma's permission, provided insights into her daughter's inner life that might have otherwise remained hidden, allowing them to address concerns and celebrate victories together, maintaining the open communication that had become central to their relationship. As the years passed and Emma's reputation grew, opportunities arose that tested their values and principles in new ways. A reality TV show wanted to feature Emma, offering significant money for her family to be filmed navigating the auction world with her abilities. Sarah and David discussed it with Emma, presenting the pros and cons honestly, and Emma decided against it, saying she didn't want her life turned into entertainment, that she valued her privacy and normalcy too much to trade it for fame and money. A major auction house offered Emma a long-term contract with guaranteed income if she would work exclusively with them, predicting results for their most important sales. Again, after family discussion, they declined, not wanting Emma tied to any single organization, wanting to maintain independence and flexibility as she grew and her interests potentially changed. A wealthy collector offered to fund Emma's entire education through university in exchange for regular consultations on his acquisitions. They declined that too, uncomfortable with the implied obligation and the power imbalance it would create. These decisions reinforced their deep commitment to Emma, teaching her that not everything valuable should be pursued, that opportunities have hidden costs, that integrity matters more. The small business stayed focused on quality and ethics, ensuring Emma's childhood